Welcome to the only place where real, raw, and vulnerable conversations happen with IFBB bikini pros to give you an inside look at their struggles, strategies, mindset, passions, and all of life beyond the stage. This podcast is made to inspire, motivate, and remind competitors and the average gym goer that even the most extreme lifestyles and elite athletes have their ups and downs. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Celeste Turk, and now it's time for the Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. Today's video and audio guest has been competing since 2014 and won her pro card by placing first at NPC Universe in 2021. She has been a sponsored athlete since 2016 and has been featured in publications like Fitness RX. And in 2018, she started working with Jamie DeBernard, which, by the way, Jamie's been on the podcast. You guys, that was during Coaches Week. So definitely check that out if you haven't yet. And Jamie and her started working together. Jamie's her coach. And then Megan recently hit the Nashville Fit Show for her pro debut. Outside of bodybuilding, she works as the owner of her business, Second Burst, which is a consulting coaching company that specializes in the second in command and has extensive experience as a COO and CPA, with her most recent position being the second in command for a $10 million IT company. She has been recognized in Nashville's 40 Under 40, Nashville Emerging Leader Award in Technology, and the Stevie Woman of the Year Award. So talk about someone who's well decorated, even outside of the sport, which I love. And if you guys do want to catch this on video, by the way, head over to YouTube, Celestial_fit. Everything is there, but let's welcome Megan Long. How are you doing?
I'm good. Oh my gosh, you weren't kidding when you said you scraped the website for adding more. I did not put all that in my bio.
Well, see, you're too humble. And I was like, I feel like I need to, first of all, I was like, well, what's second first, And then I started learning about what is a COO. And then I was like, okay. And then I'm looking at your website. I'm like, this girl is like not telling us all of her accomplishments.
Well, thank you. That's very sweet. I appreciate it. And I'm so excited to be here. We have been talking about doing this since I think 2021. And I really wanted to make sure that I at least had stepped on the pro stage before doing this podcast and trying to share experiences. So I'm glad we finally made it happen.
Me too. Yes. Long time coming. And honestly, like, you're so impressive. And as I was telling you before we hit record, I really like that you exemplify success on and off the stage. That's something that I'm excited to talk about, as well as your 7-year journey to going pro. But before we get into everything, is there anything you do or think about, or maybe a ritual you have right before your heel hits the stage?
So, literally right before I hit the stage, I just kind of close my eyes and in my head, just say, thank you for the blessings I'm about to receive. I'm kind of big on like visualization and manifesting and all of that. So it's just a way of, for me, putting my mind on like, okay, I'm about to receive blessings, but then also just having a moment of gratitude for even just being there and being open to receive whatever it might be. Also, I'm like, before that, backstage, before prejudging, I'm such a person that just has to be quiet. I like talking immediately gets my heart rate up and my nerves going. So I feel like I always just come across as such a hermit before prejudging, but at check-in and then finals, I'm just like, yeah, let's have a good time. It's over now. But
that's great. I feel bad sometimes when I want to go into my Zen mode before the stage, but also like you see some athletes, like they really thrive on stage when they've gotten into that zone of chit chat. I'm one of those who's like, I'm just going to zone out, but I'll make small talk here and there. I'm not going to ignore someone, but there are going to be moments where I'm just straight up chilling. But for me, it varies show to show. Some shows I'd be on another level of talking it up.
It definitely depends on the energy. Each show has such different energies backstage. So that's why you mentioned my pro debut was the Nashville Fit Show. And there's just something I think about having an all-woman environment too, that just made that such a comfortable backstage experience where the nerves weren't as high and it didn't feel as, I don't know, it just felt like a sorority experience versus something that competitive. So it
I
was a
love
little,
that.
yeah, for sure. It's a
And
great show.
that's put on by Whitney Weiser, who you guys, she's also been on the podcast, and talk about an inspiring story and someone who represents our industry so beautifully.
Seriously, I remember when her story hit the news here in Nashville
Oh,
originally.
really?
And man, yeah, she definitely has a testimony and a story, and she's just such a great ambassador of the sport.
Yeah, it's nice to have women who we can support in the industry too. And I find that this industry and community is truly very uplifting. You're going to have moments like any industry or any business, but I would say 9 times out of 10, my experiences are always so positive.
Yeah, agreed. Definitely.
So a few days ago, I'm just going to jump right into it. Well, by the time people hear this, it'll be a couple months because I record well in advance. If you guys don't know that, I try to record episodes at least 1 month in advance, sometimes two, like around the holidays, because I know people get busy. So we're about 2 months out from this episode coming out. But you had posted recently that after this show, you felt like you no longer had anything to chase in this sport anymore. And you use the word retirement, and sometimes that feels finite. But right now, you're in retirement and you feel like a winner, and you were prepared to step away, proud, feeling fulfilled after a decade in this sport. So can you talk to us more about what went into this statement specifically, and then your overall decision?
Yeah, absolutely. So this season, I did the Nashville Fit Show. And then a week later, I did Clash, which is Joe's show in Charleston. And going into Clash, I knew it was going to be my last show. And there was just a point that I hit during this prep. Like you said, I just felt very fulfilled. I felt very satisfied. I had my whole career of competing, like you said, felt like I was chasing something. I was chasing a win. I was chasing a placing. I was chasing a pro card. And this season, I just didn't feel like I had to keep chasing anything because I just felt so satisfied. Um, and, I'm in a different phase of life. There are other things bringing me fulfillment other than competing. I'm 34 and married and kind of ready to experience what it is to be a normal person.
What's that?
Yeah, exactly. This is scandalous. I actually deleted my Fitness Pal from my phone, and I'm like, this,
Oh,
I know. So yeah, I mean, I'm calling it retirement, knowing fully that there are athletes that have showed us that retirement doesn't have to be forever. If there comes a day where I'm like, man, I really missed the stage, I really want to do a prep again, I'll do it. And I'm not going to keep myself from returning to the sport just because I decided to retire. But right now, it just feels really good. I fully intend on staying involved in the sport. But I think it's completely okay to hit a point where you're like, man, I've loved this journey and I'm ready to kind of close this chapter.
my head is going so many different directions right now because I'm like, wait, I want to touch on that. I want to hear about this. So, first of all, we do know because Tom Brady, he retired and came back.
So many athletes have done it. Like, it doesn't mean anything anymore.
Yeah, exactly. But I think you made some really key points that I want to go back to. So, one is that you felt fulfilled. So, the next one you made was also that you're at a different stage in your life. You want to experience more normalcy. I do think sometimes after a competitor brain has been built for 10 years, there's no more such thing as complete. It's going to take another 20 years to replace that.
Right. Absolutely. I know. I think by normalcy, I mean like I am excited to exercise in a way that isn't so rigid. And bodybuilding is really rough on your body, and so I'm excited to do things that are a little more gentle and just be kind to my body versus like I've been pushing and pushing and pushing, especially to build size as a 6 foot tall competitor. And now I can, I'll do Pilates if I want to do Pilates. I'll do yoga, go for a walk, just do things that more feel good versus kind of push it past its normal limit.
I love that. That's something that I think is often overlooked for competitors. We do get so wrapped up into that like build mentality, like, okay, bikini has this criteria, so I can only train for this. Like, I haven't trained legs. I mean, I did some compound movements in the beginning of this prep, but like, I don't train legs because they're too big. But like, when I'm done with this sport, if ever, or I take a break, I want to train how I want to train. Not that
Yeah.
I don't like training like this. It's just a different energy. Like you said, you're looking forward to just giving your body what she wants in that time frame and knowing that that's just as fulfilling too.
Yeah. Well, and that mindset that you have is the right mindset to have as a competitor. Like your job is to get judges' feedback and then go work on delivering on that feedback and then coming back and showing them that you listened. So, I mean, your mentality is spot on when you're still in the sport. But I agree, there is something really nice to just be able to train the way you truly want to train.
Yes. And you also talked about you're very tall, putting muscle on your frame is difficult. Later, I'm going to ask you about how you did that because you did put on a lot of size, and watching your last improvement season too was super awesome, just that progression. But you also mentioned earlier that you felt fulfilled. What did that actually feel like? How did you notice, like, okay, I'm no longer chasing. I actually feel satisfied and ready to step away. What could someone look for? Or what did you in particularly feel?
That is such a good question and so hard to explain. I think a combination of a couple things. First was just thinking, I used to think about retirement or look at athletes that retired and be like, I can't even imagine. Why would you step away from this? This is the best. Like, I'm obsessed with this. And so thinking about retirement sounding nice, I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I'm ready for that. Just being at peace with where I'm at. I think the other thing was, okay, there's two things. Uh, Being okay with not placing, because Nashville Fit Show, I was like last call outs, which fine. I needed to be more conditioned. Came back the next weekend after we really hustled, and I was like somewhere in the middle of the pack. And I'm like, man, middle of the pack at a pro show. That's awesome. And I'm like, okay, I'm no longer in the mentality of like, have to get first call outs, have to, like, is it even realistic for me to go to Olympia at this point? Maybe, but like, what would that take? And so just kind of being okay to be at the level I was at and kind of leave at that level, like not having to keep improving, keep chasing. Um, and my feedback was really good from both shows. At Clash, my last show of the season, Sandy did mention that in order to be more competitive, I would need more upper body. And kind of what you were saying, where like you really kind of miss training legs. I was like, God, whatever you do for the stage, you also have to be okay with walking around in day to day. And like I've put on a lot of upper body size, and I just I wouldn't want to put any more on either. So it's also like, okay, do you want to keep doing what the judges want, or do you want to kind of fit your own criteria, knowing it's not going to be rewarded on stage?
Absolutely love that. I have a few friends who are in the pro league, and they do it because they like to step on stage, not because they need to win. They really just do it for the experience and to constantly improve. And
Yeah.
I think there's beauty in that. I do wonder though, as a professional on a big team too, did you feel pressure to feel like or did you ever think my goal should be Olympia? My goal should be to go that next step and win?
Before I, so my husband got me this like journal, and it has 10 lines, and you have to come up with like basically 10 statements that are like future statements of things that you want to be true of your life like 10 years from now or something. And so every single morning I would write down those 10 things. It was like, I live in my dream house. I have friends that love me and I love them, like those kind of things. And one of them was, I am an IFBB pro and Olympian. So to me, at least until I turned pro, they always went together. Like, because once you turn pro, what's the next step? Be an Olympian, right? So definitely had to kind of decouple those once I did get my pro card, because it's like, okay, no, you can enjoy just being a pro too.
I love that. I recently spoke with Amber, Amber P. She does makeup as well,
Yeah.
but yeah. So she was sharing how like she realizes God's plan isn't for her to be Miss Bikini Olympia. Maybe it'd be nice to get to the Olympia stage, but it's not part of her plan as a pro. And I think that we get super caught up as competitors because we are high achievers. We like to go for things, strive for things. You have proven that you can do that in other areas of your life too. And before we talk about that transition as well, and also how it complemented this journey, I don't get this opportunity a lot to talk about or talk with someone fresh out of the game, right? Fresh out of that mindset of, I got to win, I got to keep pushing. So what would you tell yourself 10 years ago before starting this journey?
Gosh. So I was in such a different place when I first started. When I very first started competing, it was almost just like, I don't want to say a bucket list thing, but so I rewind just to give you a little bit of a backstory without turning into a Shaggy Dog story. Um, my my why of competing, I basically was in public accounting as a CPA, worked myself into the hospital for a week.
Wow.
And my health just completely tanked. There's a whole long story to that, but I'll shorten it. So when I got out of the hospital, I was like, okay, I have not been taking care of myself. I was smoking a pack and a half of cigarettes a day. I was going to happy hours. I was working 13 or more hours a day. So I was like, I need to take care of my health here. So I completely overhauled my diet, started exercising, and my husband and I were dating at the time. And he was like, why don't you try like lifting weights? And I was like, okay, all right, I'll try it. And so I did. And I just have like an insanely competitive personality. So once I started doing that, I'm like, okay, what's next? How can I make this like a competitive thing? Found competing. Um, but for the first like however many years, I was just doing it because I enjoyed it. I wasn't really taking it seriously. So I think if I could go back in time, now I feel like those were almost wasted years because I didn't start really taking it seriously until I met Jamie in 2018 and was like, okay, let's actually do something with this. And it's such an extreme lifestyle to do it just to do it. So, I would probably tell myself to find a really good coach, take it seriously, and see how far you could take it as early as you can take it.
That's really great advice. I too wish that I could have made more of the beginning part of my journey.
Yeah, totally. Because you've been doing it for a long time too, right?
Yeah, so I started in 2015, so almost a decade and 2 years. Yeah,
Man,
that's
so we were in the era before the like fully blinged suits. And
my first show I didn't have a bling suit. It was what would now be a posing suit. And I'm like, I bought it. This is so weird. I bought this suit on Instagram. I searched hashtag competition suit for sale. This girl didn't even post a picture of the suit, okay? It's literally in a I'm like, oh, this was posted 3 years ago or whatever. I wonder if she still has it. I said, worth a shot. Hey, are you still selling that bikini? Yeah, actually I am. I brought it with me when I moved because it didn't sell in the garage sale. I said, you take $20 for it? She goes, sure. She says the suit for $20 through Instagram. Seriously. And I wore that on stage and I'm like, you could not do that now. Like you
amazing.
could not. it wasn't even fit, you know? It was just like,
Yes.
hope it works.
Yeah, they were off the rack. Our shoes came from legitimate exotic dance websites. Like, hilarious. It's so funny how evolved everything has been.
Yeah, really, it is. I think it's also a testament to how competitive it's gotten because we had to up level in every way. Like you personally found in your last show that you really nailed your look, which was satisfying for you. But that was over the course of many years. You could say a few years because you felt most serious in 2018. So to finally nail your look at the end, that's something to be, really proud of and excited about. But how did you personally evolve in your mindset towards bodybuilding over that decade of you in it? Like your original, maybe outlook on it compared to the end.
Yeah. I think a lot of it has to do with self-belief and then having a coach that I felt truly believed in my potential. Um, at the very beginning, I was self-coached. And then I was with another coach and never, ever felt like they actually believed in me. I wasn't one of like the favorites. I wasn't, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
especially when you're at like a national show or something with your team, and you can immediately tell that the attention you're getting is different. Um, it takes such a hit on your like ego and confidence. And so when I found Jamie and I look back on like pictures and videos from our first posing sessions, I'm like, why the hell did you take me on? Like, what did you see? And I don't know, she saw potential or something. And she always, and I mean, she has a serious roster and always has. And the fact that, like, as an amateur, that was so rough, especially in 2018, that she always made me feel just as important and had just as much potential as her top pros at the time. I think that really changed my attitude towards competing.
That's beautiful. Jamie certainly has a way with people. Like she's not even my coach, and yet every interaction I've had with her has just been incredibly positive and uplifting and supportive. And she saw me. We were together at Cuties Conquering the Stage event, and she's like, "Those legs, you gotta be careful," because I was wearing a pretty short dress, and she's like, I was like, "Oh, it's just fat." She's like, "No, like, how dare you?" you know? And I was like, "You're right, though. For reals, I'm just trying to make myself feel better." She's like, "You gotta stop touching those." I'm like, "We're trying." So she's just always been so helpful, and every conversation, like, you feel like she's really present with you. And I think having a coach, like you said, who believes in you, that's
Yes.
something that changed in my journey too, was having a coach who I felt didn't want to grow this way with me with the foundation, but instead wanted to grow up and wanted to build me up. And I think having someone who believes in you will encourage you to believe more in yourself, whether we like to believe it or not. Humans are community based. We're born from another human, right? We're born from two humans. Like it's just part of our nature. So to have that belief is awesome. And I'm curious if you guys are going to continue to work together or stay. You said you were staying involved in the industry and community. So does that involve continuing coaching?
So I don't think I would be a good coach at all. At least, well, okay, I take that back. Executives, great.
Yeah.
Bodybuilding, probably not. Um, but yeah, when I told her that, she's like, okay, so what's next? And I was like, I think I'm good. And she's like, wait, good for like the season or good? And I just start like bawling and I'm like, I think I'm done. And I had told Greg earlier in that day, and he's like, I knew this was coming. I'm like, shut
Wow.
up, Greg. He always is like one step ahead, I feel. He's
Mm.
such like a, I don't know. But yeah, so I mean, they're family at this point. I don't know how exactly I'm going to stay involved, but I mean, I still want to go to shows. I still want to see them. So we'll see. I don't know. It's still so early, like, haven't really given many brain cycles to what the future looks like.
Totally understand that. Sometimes it's just ideas or nice things, but soaking in this moment too of leaving behind sport you committed so much to is also really beautiful. Like we need to take the time to embrace the season we're in. And in this case, it's not immediately, let's go to the next thing. Instead, it's like, okay, I'm going to soak in the fact of everything I did over the last 10 years. So when you look back, what are some of the standout memories or proud moments for you?
So before the memories, I just want to completely agree with what you're saying. And I think that for anyone that is considering doing this or like retiring or stepping away, like I'm working with a therapist during this season because I know how, like, now I have to decouple my identity from this because as bodybuilders, it's such a part of our identity. Like our Instagram handles say IFBB Pro, like it's just
Right.
who we are. So yeah, I'm working through with help on, okay, how do I shift my mentality into just being Megan now? How do I eat without physique goals? How do I look at my body in a different way? All things that I know you're very familiar with. Um, so yeah, that's definitely, I'm glad that you brought up kind of honoring that liminal space of transitioning between being a competitor and just, a person. But moments that I'm proud of, gosh, um, I think my favorite season by far was the 2021 season where I ended up getting my pro card. It was just really special though because I had become close with a lot of people by that point just from competing at so many shows. So it just felt very comfortable and familiar and being around all the same competitors and expediters and class H women and teammates and everything. So it was a really fun season. And I think that a lot of competitors are really, really antsy to get their pro card. And it's like, man, enjoy those amateur years. Like they are so fun. Like amateur shows, national shows, like soak them up because even though they have crazy emotional highs and lows, um, they're definitely really great memories.
Love that. Yeah, that's such a great point. Like to just soak it in. And I also love to hear that you're working with someone to support that transition as well, because those types of adjustments, even just coming off of the prep to improvement season is hard enough. So an entire stepping away is so important. And there's research that supports that athletes who have focus outside of their identity in sports actually tend to have more positive retirement experiences because their identity isn't too wrapped up in it necessarily.
Yeah.
So you were pursuing a lot of your professional goals while also pursuing your pro card and then competing as a pro. And I do think, as I mentioned to you privately earlier, that a lot of competitors fall prey to this message that you can only have one or the other. You can't do both and be successful. I think this message is really strong lately of like, you're not going to be successful as a competitor unless it's your entire life. There's no balance in this, but you're like, yeah.
I know.
So what have you done in your journey to support this growth and success in both areas or all areas?
Yeah, that drives me crazy. Like when I listen to other podcasts in this industry and they're like, you have to give it like 100% all the time. It's like, man, I don't know if I ever gave it 100%. Like, um, but yeah, I think so. You mentioned that they complement each other, and I think they really do because, and I was talking to a friend of mine about this at one of the shows this year, where I always felt so much more on at work when I was in prep because it gave so much structure. It took away all the decision making of like macros and exercise. Like you didn't really have to think about anything other than just like time management at that point. So I always felt so much more productive and so much more on at work when I was in a prep. I mean, there's another side to this that I'll touch on, but so you saying that people think that they have to do one or the other. When I first started doing this, I was still working at a CPA firm, and I was terrified that I was going to get fired because it was, I mean, it was still an environment where women had to wear pantyhose to work. It was it was very conservative. I think that has changed, especially post COVID, but back then it was very conservative. So I kept it a secret. People were like, why can't you eat at this happy hour? And I was like, oh, I just really like eating chicken out of Tupperware. Like,
Yeah.
So I kept it a secret, and then I left and went to corporate and competed for the very first time. And I still wasn't comfortable telling people. And for years, I felt like I had to keep those two identities so separate. Like I felt like, and I mean, I know that there are competitors out there that literally have to compete under aliases because of their job. So I was just always of the mindset like, okay, these are two lives that I'm living, like my competing life and my professional life. And it wasn't until I ended up at the IT company that you mentioned, where it was led by an entrepreneur founder. It was a very different environment, and he was very competitive, appreciated sports. And so I felt like I could start to be a little more open about it, and found that everyone got really excited. Everyone was really supportive. Anytime I had a competition, they're like, all right, you better go win. There was even one year where I had a competition and I got first. It was like the only first place I've ever gotten in my entire career. And I got one of those swords back when they were still doing that. Mm-hmm. And one of the help desk managers put it in the slide deck for an all company meeting, like, Megan got a sword. Like, aww. It was just a completely different environment. And I'm like, okay, I need to just make this who I am. Like, I need to be comfortable that I can be both, and I don't need to keep these separate. And in fact, when I started my company now, I'm like, I'm leaning way the hell into this. Like, this is a selling point that I'm a pro athlete now, because so I even put it on my website, like, it's my competitive advantage. I'm a pro athlete. I'm a bodybuilder. And what does this have to do with business? Like, I'm obsessed with winning. I thrive in routine, strict regimens and situations that require intense discipline. Time management is an essential skill. And we're all always committed to improving. Like, there's no finish line. So we're always looking for feedback on how we can improve. And all of those things translate directly to business and your professional life. So they really do go hand in hand. I have completely forgot the initial question, but I am all fired up talking about it.
No, honestly, you answered it in part as far as like how the journeys complement each other, and that proof that you can be successful in both, and how those personal drivers, the competitiveness, the will to win, the time management, the ability to execute on more than one thing at once, really, like, you acknowledge that both of these things go with both of these. And I love how you talked about your progression too, and comfort with, okay, I'm not just Megan the worker here, and I'm not just Megan the competitor here. It can be both, and using it to your advantage now in your business, I think, is so smart too, because it's going to inspire others as well. Like, I think it immediately builds a trust factor, because you're not having to prove that you're someone with discipline. Your accolades speak for themselves. So that's important, and it's a beneficial thing to not just you as a person, but the people you're going to be working with. So what was it that made you want to start the business and leave working for other companies?
So I had always attended, I was the COO of this company that I was there for a little under 10 years. And I had always attended both owners' meetings and COO meetings for like industry groups, peer groups, things like that. And so I would be in a room with all of these entrepreneurs, hearing them talk about their business. And then I would also be in a room with other COOs, hearing them talk about the exact same business. And they were telling completely different stories. And, entrepreneurs are these visionaries. They're more creative, more fast paced. They have ideas. And then COOs are second in commands. They're operational, they're logical, they like plans and things laid out and detail and all that. So they just don't speak the same language. And people would joke like, oh man, I wish I had a Megan because my entrepreneur and I worked so well together. So I was like, man, there's just a gap here. And there aren't many executive coaches out there specifically for COOs because every COO has a completely different job. Like there's no COO magazine, there's no like every other position of an executive has something, and there really isn't for that second in command. So second first, I started it to fill that gap. There's a coaching framework that I built out specifically for COOs on how to work better with their entrepreneurs and kind of really transform that relationship. And then the second arm is for entrepreneurs that have grown their business to a point where now they truly need someone in that seat. Like they're past having a badass executive assistant, they need a COO. So we have an assessment process to help them figure out based on their personality, based on their weaknesses, their business, who they need as their puzzle piece. So it
Wow.
really through my own experiences and then seeing that there really was no support out there for my own role.
That's a beautiful thing to be able to recognize a problem and seek to solve it. So you yourself are able to be an entrepreneurial spirit and also have the COO qualities to bring that vision to life, which you are. And that's awesome. And I love how you broke that down. Now I'm curious from a business standpoint, and I'm sure we have other entrepreneurs listening who are running a business who might be considering that. What's the difference between a executive assistant and a COO?
Yeah, so an executive assistant, I think, is someone that you can delegate to and offload tasks to. A COO is someone that really is going to run the operations of your business. So, someone who can take your vision as an entrepreneur, even a conversation over coffee, and say, okay, I'll make that happen. And you might have an idea at like a 1 or a 2, but it's not fleshed out yet. And then they can go take it to a 9 and come up with the resources needed, the budget, the plan, and bring it back to you at like a 9. And then you can take it to a 10. That's really who a COO is, someone that can lead your leadership team too, if you have one.
That's super awesome because you're right that a lot of entrepreneurs are more so the visionary. They have ideas, but they want someone else to support the execution. And you mentioned earlier, part of your business mission is to support entrepreneurs in finding the right COO. Does this mean you have a roster of COOs, or you're more so providing them like a way to match themselves when they're looking for someone?
It's a assessment process. It's an engagement that is a thorough assessment process where basically they get a report on the other side of that has a full profile of who their ideal second in command would be, including like if you're familiar with the book Top Grading, like a top grading scorecard to use in recruiting. I have a few recruiters that I really trust to then go find that person. And then Second First helps with onboarding, the first 90 days, all of that. So not recruiting, no roster, but everything else.
That's so cool. I think that's such an invaluable resource. And to bring that is scary, right? Like when you're bringing something new to a space, that's a really good idea, right? You're like, surely this has been tried before, so I maybe shouldn't do this. Like I thought with this podcast, I'm like, okay, this is a great idea, but it's not being done, so maybe it's actually a horrible idea. And then you launch it and you're like, it's working, it's happening. So what gave you the courage to say, I'm leaving that job and that's, I don't know if stability is the right word, because it seems like you maybe feel stability regardless, but what led you to eventually say, yep, pull the trigger, it's time to launch?
The first thing was I loved the company I was at and was so invested with the company I was at that I waited a long time until I felt like it would be okay for me to step away. I'm actually still there fractionally. So I haven't completely stepped away, but I just wanted it to be the right time just because that was such an important group of people and such an important place to me that I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to damage anything. So that was the first thing. The second thing was just I don't know, I think I just believed in it so much that I didn't have any doubts or second thoughts or hesitations. Probably because I had been the target client profile. Like I was that person. And so I knew like, okay, I would pay for this like 5 times over. And like I was telling you before we started, you always hope like, okay, I know this is needed. I know that this is filling a gap, but man, I hope everyone else does too. And the response to anyone in my circle that I tell or any entrepreneur, they're like, oh, holy shit. Like, yes, like that is needed. So just in the first few months, I was like, okay, like this was the right decision. This is needed. So it's nice to have that validation.
Absolutely. Yes, it is. Like when I decided to bring mental health to the bodybuilding space, I had so many people, they were like, don't do it. It's not going to work. All these coaches are going to want to fight you on it because they're going to think you're stealing their business. And the opposite was true. And I'm glad I didn't listen. And I remember when I got my first 2 clients, I was like, this is going to be successful. I got 2. I know I can do 200. Like, come on, let's go. So yes. You grow with it and you have to take those leaps of faith. When you have that purpose inside of you, you know that it's going to be great and you can make an impact. I almost think sometimes that if I didn't take that leap of faith, that I would think about it the rest of my life. Everything could fail and that's fine. At least I tried, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I was actually listening to another podcast yesterday though, and it was talking about how right now there's such a culture, especially online, of like, you have to be an entrepreneur. Like you have to start a business. You have to do a digital course. You have to do this. And it's like, it is not for everyone. And if you have no desire to be an entrepreneur and if you love getting your W-2, that is perfect. Like most of these people on Instagram saying that you should go start your own business are going to try and make money off of you trying to start a business. So yeah, there's just so much pressure out there. So I think as excited and as fulfilled and as successful as this has been for me to become an entrepreneur and for you to start this podcast and to bring, like you said, mental health to the bodybuilding world as an entrepreneur, like it is very much so also not for everyone.
Yes, exactly. Like there's this anti-employee mentality out there, which
Yeah.
I think is detrimental to a lot of employees' mental health because it makes them feel like they're not good enough or they're not fulfilling some sort of life purpose they're meant to find and fulfill. And it seems like everyone's an entrepreneur. It seems like that's just because that's being put on your feed. It's being put in front of you. You're not likely to see the person who's really happy in what these other people would call an average life. That's okay to live that way. It's a beautiful thing to wake up, have your routine, and enjoy it. And even from a personality trait perspective, there are certain personalities, if you look at the Big Five model, that do complement employer mentality and others that complement employee mentality. And
Yeah.
some will be more fulfilled as an employee than they would. And I was actually talking to my assistant about this. Like, I asked her, would you ever hire anyone? She's like, I got out of management for a reason, right? And I love that. It's like, yeah, she's going to listen to this and edit it and be like, hi, Lara. Anyway, so yeah, I think it's important that we all recognize we have gifts, we have abilities. And something that I thought was also really cool about what you're offering to the space, just in general on your website, that I noticed was a book recommendation list. So I had to ask if there are any of those books in particular that have impacted you or your daily habits from reading them.
Okay, so pulling the conversation back into bodybuilding, because I'm sure like a third of the people listening are like, I don't care about business. I just
Which I am going to be asking her about her recent prep, y'all. I'm just really engaged with the outside of.
So my favorite books that kind of cross over into both, I highly recommend a book called Elite Minds by Dr. Stan Beecham. He is a sports psychologist that worked with athletes to basically overcome like mental blocks they had that were affecting their performance. And the book kind of tells all those stories, but then also relates it to how you can use those techniques in your professional life or just in your day-to-day life. And it helped me a lot in like just competing as well. So that one, and then there's another one. It's just a compilation by Harvard Business Review, the 10 must reads on mental toughness. And that also, man, if prep is getting hard, like that is a really good read just to like really kind of like harden your mind a little bit and kind of I don't want to say like almost like stoicism, but just really get in control of your mental space and get through those really tough days of prep where you're like, okay, I'm really starting to break because of my emotions around this. So those are two really good reads, both for business and for bodybuilding.
Love that. No, that's super helpful. And I think you mentioned earlier too, you journal, you have other skills in place, it sounds like, that have helped you to be successful. And I would regret not asking you about your mental health because you've shared how there's been stress in this prep and there's also been, you've healthily managed depression too. So talk to us about how important that's been or what the impact on mental health has been throughout this journey.
Yeah, so I do have clinical depression. It is very well managed now. It was not always well managed. And I think if you are a competitor that has any sort of condition similar to that, whether it's anxiety, depression, whatever, knowing when to push and when to pull back is really important because no one likes to start a prep and then like quit because you've paid money usually that for a coach because prep is always more expensive. You have sacrificed a lot in terms of, not going out, not eating what you want to eat, lots of cardio, like you have all these sunk costs. But it's not always worth it to keep pushing through. And so 2020 was a really good example of that for me. We had started a prep. It was going to be the year that I was going to, get that pro card finally. And at the time, my, COVID hit, and the business that I was at, it was an extremely stressful time because of that. Like the shutdowns were happening. We had clients that were in tourism and events and concerts and all of that. So we were seeing clients start to drop like flies, which meant revenue was starting to go down. So, my CEO and I, we were like, okay, our commitment is that we're not going to lose any employees. We're not going to cut any employees' pay. So how do we make this work? And so, man, I was like ripping out any like expense that wasn't absolutely necessary. I turned in our fleet of cars. I'm like, we don't need these right now. Like and right before COVID hit, our office was hit by a tornado. I forgot that. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So office was hit by a tornado, and we had to like immediately all go work from home. So we actually had like a week head start on working from home. COVID hit anyway. So it was just such a stressful time. And I know a lot of people were dealing with depression at that time. But as someone that like already dealt with it, it just went from like 0 to 100, like days where I would work and then just was horizontal on the couch the rest of the time because I just couldn't function. So I knew that I could either keep pushing and keep prepping, which we were already like 5 months in, or I just call it. And, the shows that we were going to do kept getting pushed anyway. And finally I was like, Jamie, this is not a good time for me. Like I need all of my attention somewhere else. Finally got on some medication because I had my own mental stigma around that, and was like, for some reason, thought that that was like a sign of weakness. So yeah, I think that was my biggest takeaway, is just being okay with it, maybe just not being the right time to do a prep.
I really, really love that story because it is hard to pull out of a prep or any commitment that we're heavily invested in. It's difficult because we want to see ourselves succeed. We want to see ourselves get through to the other side. But what's more important is knowing when it's time to step back is more important than pushing forward all the time. And I think that has probably been a lot of the reason you have longevity and you've had success, is because you've known when to step on the gas and when to step on the brakes. And that's an important skill to have in order to have the success and the sustainability long term. But when did you first find out about your depression and the symptoms involved with that? And how did you go about getting help when you weren't on board with medication?
I was originally diagnosed when I was 19, I think. And when I was diagnosed, they put me on Prozac, I think, and I just felt like an absolute robot. Hated it, but I was 19 and I didn't know, oh, I can talk to my doctor and try a different one. So I was just young and dumb and was like, all right, well, this medication sucks. I'm not going to take it. I'll just like, I almost said something crass. I'm just going to like stick it out, like I'll just deal with it. So I did. And looking back, there were a number of times where I'm like, oh my gosh, like I found other things, I think, to like provide dopamine,
Yeah.
And probably wasn't the healthiest, but I'm glad that rock bottom did happen in 2020, because I feel like just a completely different human now that I did get on the right mix of medication.
Yeah, I love hearing stories like this because it shows that we all are capable of change and transformation, even dramatic transformation. I mean, you went from smoking cigarettes to being a pro bodybuilder. Like, let's not forget that.
Totally. Well, and I think it's a little frustrating for me. I know everyone has their own opinion and their own views on things, but especially in like the health and fitness world and the bodybuilding world, it seems like I read so much about people say, like, you can cure your depression with exercise, or you can cure your depression with like diet or mindset or whatever. And it's like, there's literally nothing wrong with medication because there's something wrong with my brain.
Correct.
Like exercise is not going to fix that. So I think that also didn't help my attitude towards it. But yeah, so
The best part is when this is sarcasm, by the way, but the best part is when someone goes to a therapist and the therapist is like, have you tried exercise? And the person's like, can you see that I'm a pro? Like, I literally look like all I do is lift. My whole life has been put into the gym. All my demons are in there. Like, I need something
yes.
more, doc, like it's true. The gym is
Right.
therapy, and the stage is not going to remove your problems. And even when it comes to food relationship and body image, I always try to stress to competitors, you will not have a different result with your food relationship by entering another prep. If it's a problem now, it's not going to resolve just by going back on prep.
No, absolutely. And also, I think if someone is considering competing or becoming a bodybuilder, you have to know that you will never view your body the same way again. And, that I don't think that that's talked about enough either for novices or new competitors that, I never used to body check all the time before I did this. I never used to think, oh, I'm huge right now. And I didn't think about my body at all. I didn't think twice about it. And it's funny, I was telling one of my friends at the gym, he said something about how good I was looking. I'm like, well, thank you. Cause I have literally no idea what I actually look like right now. Cause like when I look in the mirror, it's just I just don't see reality anymore. So
Yeah, which I think is such a great reason for you already seeing somebody to support with this transition too, because those patterns of thought about our body, about food, or even just the behavior patterns of body checking, they get reinforced over and over and over again. And then if you walk away with looking a certain way or being rewarded with a trophy, it's your brain then being told, oh, good, that's actually a helpful behavior because now you've gotten all this hype. So
yep.
continue to do that. But in reality, you add on top of that 1 year, 2 years, 10 years. That's 10 years worth of habits and behaviors and thoughts that we're now needing to rewrite. Beautiful thing is it can be rewritten. The difficult thing is the stronger the pathway, the more work that has to be done to rewrite the pathway or at least redirect it somewhere else. But it certainly does change how you see things forever.
Was it you that made the analogy of these neural pathways being like riding a bike through mud,
Yes, that
basically,
was
like
me.
over and over? Oh my gosh, that stuck with me for years. I'm like,
Um,
yes. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so true. Like you just dig this groove over and over, and then it's up to you then to consciously like change direction.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my gosh, that is so cool. Wow. When analogies are awesome for that, but hearing it told back to me that stuck with you is like amazing.
100%. Oh my gosh, I've told that to so many people too. So I need to little trademark Celeste after that.
That's so cool. Well, I'm so happy about that. And I want to also speak to the fact that you overcame the thought that medication was a weakness. And unfortunately, it is promoted that all of this can be resolved with nutrition and training. And while those things have a major impact, as well as,
Mhm.
good stress relieving habits or making sure that we're on top of if something is behavioral or environmental, we can address that and then see how it impacts the mind. but there are also chemical imbalances that people do experience that lead to this type of behavior or this type of thinking pattern. And we can't ignore that. So it's really great that you were able to overcome that. But I also think that it's important we touch on how disheartening it is when people look at someone with a great life and an amazing personality, personable, look like they're killing it, but are depressed. And then they judge them for it. Like they judge them for being depressed. And I'm wondering if you ever felt judgment or guilt or shame for having the clinical depression diagnosis, but also having this great life.
I never felt judged or shame, but I think you're right. I think that because a lot of people don't look the part, I mean, look at Robin Williams. Like there are so many people out there that mask all day long. And especially as like an executive basically running a company, you have to be on, you have to be running meetings, you have to be doing one-on-ones, you have to be, now I'm out there networking, selling, um, you know, in all these groups all day long. And it sometimes when you get home, then you just like can take the mask off. And the unfortunate thing is that when you're like masking all day, then it's when you get home and can finally take it off that the people you love the most get the worst of you, and I think that relates to prep too, where during a prep, you have low energy, your hormones are kind of all over the place. And so when you're at work or, even if you're a personal trainer and you're with clients or whatever, you have to be on and use all your energy. And then you come home to your loved ones and you have nothing left. And that's when you're a bitch. And that's when you lash out. And, it's rough to have to be really conscious to be like, why am I giving the worst of myself to the people I actually care about the most?
That's a reality check. And like, you know what I mean? Because
yeah,
we're comfortable with those people. We don't have to wear a mask around them, but that also doesn't mean that they should carry all of our weight all the time. And I'm curious how you've managed your own personal relationships and kept prep as well as any mental demands from impacting your partner or others while focusing on growth.
I'm not the model citizen here. I think I can talk about it because I know it well. It used to be much worse. And I will say, like rewinding back before starting any sort of like depression medication, like I wanted to like check all the boxes first. So like, proper supplementation, gut health, and then HRT to like make sure my hormones were in check. And I will say, once I really regulated like my thyroid and my hormones, I felt like my mood was much more in control. So it did get better. But I mean, there were times over the 10 years of competing that I was really awful and like terrible to be around and, was very short tempered. And it is the reality, especially when you get to a certain level of body fat, like we're just not our best. And, it did get better, but even this last prep, my husband was like, I think just these last 2 weeks, like now I know that this is just kind of how it's gonna be, which is so terrible. But like, sometimes you just have nothing left,
Yeah.
So I think just being conscious of it and maybe having a partner or having family that can call you out on it. So you can, like you said, have a reality check and check yourself and be like, oh, okay, I'm falling back into that pattern.
So true. And actually, can you provide some more examples of what that might look like for someone who thinks that maybe someone who's not consciously aware that it's happening?
Um, Man, I think once you notice that things are really bothering you that wouldn't typically even like cross your mind, um, I think that's probably my biggest example. Or, you know, things triggering me or triggering like an attitude or a temper or something like that that truly don't matter. And it really is usually when you're actually stage lean, right? Like that's just, it's rough. But yeah, I can't necessarily think of like very specific examples to like help other people be aware. It's really hard to like hold up that mirror sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I would recommend to others to take note of your mood changes and just mood in general. Something I recommend to clients is have a mood tracker that you start in your improvement season and you continue even into your preps.
That's really good advice. Yeah, because then you can start to identify those patterns.
Exactly. Because usually in a healthy improvement season, you find your baseline. That's where we generally want to be. It's like our homeostasis for more physical terms, but like you find your baseline. And then as you start noticing it dipping or getting elevated, depending on what that looks like, not only do you become aware of how you might be behaving around others, but you can also identify negative patterns of your own. Like if your elevated mood is because your weight dropped and you saw yourself in the mirror looking good, that's a red flag too.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
So
Man.
there's some advice for you guys from Celeste, even though we don't normally do that. I hope that that's helpful. I appreciate that I could share that.
I will give you a plug. Years ago, I joined your like membership website, and you have
Yes.
so many good tools on there
Thank
that
you.
are just like really simple to implement. Like there was one, um, it was God, I'm gonna butcher this, so correct me, but basically like super helpful coming out of a prep, going into an off season. But like if you find yourself losing control around food at all, to like put in an activity basically to like break that flow or break that thought pattern to like interrupt it. And
Yes.
then after you interrupt yourself or after you interrupt that action, then you're like, okay, I actually don't want this anymore.
Absolutely. No, I know I didn't want to bring up that you were a member of the platform because I don't want to expose what people are, doing unless they bring it up. So I'm glad that you did. But yeah, you were a member for years and I'm so grateful for that. And what you're referring to is the pattern interrupt. It can be as simple as, if you're thinking about something or you're falling into a pattern, it could be as simple as saying the alphabet backwards, or it could be as extreme as if you're constantly grabbing let's say you're always leaving butter out on the counter, diet blue, and you'll look at it a second longer and then you'll know you got to put it back. So it's important to consider or even if you forget to take certain supplements, put it in the most random spot, put it on top of your toilet in the morning. You're always going to pee in the morning. It'll interrupt. So your brain any extra second of consciousness, because like if you move, right, or you go to a new place, you'll notice what patterns and habits you have that you weren't consciously aware of. Like, oh, I personally noticed, I would always go out my garage because my front door, I'd have to go downstairs and then I'd be all the way. But now I live in a house where I can just go out the front door and I'm like at my porch and I'm like, this is weird. Or like I heard noises and it was the fridge, but I was like, is that my neighbor next door? And I was like, wait, that doesn't even make sense, but it's automatic. So when we start to cause little interruptions for mindfulness, we actually bring more of that awareness for change. If you've ever struggled in your prep or your improvement season or any transition phase in this sport, you know how valuable it is to have that direct guidance and support, but it's so difficult to find, which is exactly why I created the on-demand mindset coaching platform for competitors. That is only $9.99 per month. How it works is you log into the system and you select what season you're in, and then you're prompted to select a struggle you're facing, and then even more specific struggles branching off of that. And at your fingertips, you will be given direct guidance and support with a PDF resource as well as video trainings. And you have tons of access to years of group coaching calls that you're more than welcome to replay and watch. And you get access to a live group coaching call every single month. So you're not only getting support at your fingertips, but you're also getting an incredible community there to support you along your journey. If this is something you're interested in learning more about and exploring, you can sign up at www.celestial.fit/on-demand and get access to this right away. There are no other join fees or cancel fees, so you can come and go as you please, and you are always welcome to be in the Build More Than Just a Body community.
You break the script, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So anyways, let's go to your most recent prep, because you did experience a decent amount of stress, and especially after launching your business on July 1st. So how did the stress affect your progress, and what kinds of things did you guys do to adjust or adapt?
I always, my body hates stress, and I'm sure that that's like super common for other competitors. But when I am in periods of stress, my body will not lose weight at all. So, yeah, it was a long, like 33-week prep. We kept pushing my show. We had to, I mean, Jamie is a phenomenal coach, but sometimes you just have to do what you have to do in order to get on stage. So my calories were the lowest they've ever been. My cardio was the highest it's ever been, which still, talking to other competitors, it still wasn't like extremely high, but still, we had to really grind at the end. And it wasn't until the day that I was offboarded from my company and was able to just be full-time in Second First that I started losing weight. Like, I just started dropping. And so we're like, okay, that was stress. Like, cool. Yeah, but there's just the cortisol and just everything. It just makes it so hard to lose that body fat for me. So, and I mean, we knew what it was, but it just definitely was a longer, more grueling prep than they usually are.
Yeah. And watching that journey for you, like, you could see your body changing so much. Like, every story post you make, I'd be like, damn, like, is she getting on stage tomorrow? Because is she not announcing something? She's looking so good. Like, you could see that improvement season really paid off. So what did you do to build as much muscle as you did and make the adjustments needed to deliver on judges' feedback from the prior season?
Yeah, the season 2021, when I got my pro card, my feedback always was that my glutes were too big and that my lower body was overpowering my upper body. Like, I just lacked balance. Another fun piece of feedback was that my torso was too long, which I like, what do you do? Like, how do you, that's literally just my skeleton.
That's your genetics.
Right. But that's so, like, that's how important balance is. Like, they even look at literally like torso to leg length. So once we won my pro card, we knew that we had to add a lot of upper body size to finally balance that out. So most of the workouts were upper body focused. We did a little bit of glutes only to shape and add like upper outer glutes, not necessarily grow size. So I think just really focusing training, because you can only grow so much at once, right? So I think having most of the focus be on upper body. Sandy actually even gave me the very specific feedback to build my upper chest, because it looked like concave almost between my delts. So she's like, you don't have implants, which is fine, but you're just going to need to build that muscle up so it looks like fuller. So I also take long off seasons, which, like, I know that it takes me a while to build muscle. So, taking off from July of 2021 to not competing until August of 2023, I think also really helped.
Yeah.
Oh, and the torso thing, Margaret was amazing. So I had a phone call with Margaret and I told her, like, hey, they're telling me my torso is too long. I don't know what to do about it. And so she came up with a custom cut bikini bottom that was like the wellness cut, but extra high in the front and then like extra high on the side. I don't know exactly what she did. But it created the optical illusion that my torso was shorter. And I got so many compliments about it. And it just made all the difference. So it's funny how even something like, hey, your torso is too long, like you can find ways to still even deliver on that judge's feedback, right? You just have to get creative.
So true. It's really an illusion, like from posing to your presentation. Margaret did the same thing for me because she and Angeline were talking and they were like, we like this color for Celeste, but her torso is looking really long. And she kept,
Really? Yeah.
yeah. So the new posing suit I have is cut really high versus lower because all my other suits were lower. She's like, we're going to bring it up. And you could see a difference in the balance. And I was surprised. I mean, I don't have like an excessively long torso, but you could see it, especially when I'm like doing certain, like if I ever face the front or in some cases in my front pose, it just looked extra long because the cut was so low. But
Sure.
yeah, Margaret is awesome for that. And it really is amazing when you can make a small change like that can go such a long way.
Oh, that's so funny that you also dealt with the, the long torso issue. But yeah, that was my first time working with someone on a suit that they were willing to be so custom. And it was just a really great experience.
I love that. And you definitely have made such huge adjustments to your physique. Like you said, you had to put in that time to build your upper body and a little bit of touches to the glutes. So when you were told your glutes are too big, did you feel like they were where you wanted them to be personally? Or did you feel like, dang, I was kind of hoping to keep doing more?
I I wasn't necessarily hoping to keep growing them, but I think you're, I mean, that's what bikini is, right? Like it's mostly just glutes and shoulders to just oversimplify it. But like, I never thought I would hear your glutes are too big. And the fact that every single show, it was like, your glutes are too big, your glutes are too big, your glutes are too big. Um, I don't know. Part of this is messed up. Part of me felt like proud, like, yeah,
Yeah,
I finally grew my glutes to be too big.
that's awesome.
Yeah, I guess it was a little frustrating because it's something that you're so proud of and it's something that you think looks so good. But also, I think it's just a testament to how people look in photos is so different to how they look on stage or in real life. So you might think, oh, I look perfect based on what I'm seeing online. But once you get up there compared to other people, it's like, oh, whoa, no, I really overshot here. Like I'm too big. So
Wow. Well, especially being in the class that you are, being so tall, I feel like that balance must be really hard to find.
I think so. And so Laura and I are both like 6 feet tall. And so we did a number of shows together. And there were a couple shows where there were a few of us tall competitors. And so the hope was like, okay, because there's so many of you now that are tall on stage, the judges can actually compare you as opposed to you just standing out like a sore thumb, you know? And that was something else that I never really put together until the last couple of years where, you know, you want to be eye catching in bikini, but not necessarily stand out. Like there's a difference. And
Yeah.
so unfortunately, when you're 6 feet tall, you stand out and you're not necessarily like fitting in and the best physique out of all of them that fit in. It's like, oh, you like one of these things is not like the other. So um it's a little difficult, but
Did you ever get feedback like that? Like, oh, you being tall made it hard for us to judge you?
I didn't. No. I mean, I would hear jokes or like even Becky at the Nashville Fit Show was like, "Oh, you're one of my tall girls." So
Oh,
I think it's just part of like the identity and just part of what you're known for. But I don't think that the feedback would ever be like, oh, it's difficult to judge you because you're tall. But at the same point, it is hard to compare. Like it's hard to compare someone who's 6 foot to someone that's 5'2". Um, so, I don't know. The judges have their work cut out for them.
seriously. Absolutely true, especially because all of our structures are different, and yet the bikini criteria allows us to exemplify different structures in a beautiful way.
Agreed. Yes, that's such a good way of putting it.
So looking back on this journey and you went from your pro debut to the next show being a class show, you said you had to get more conditioned, but you were already pushing a lot of cardio and low food, it sounds like. So what was that final week into, I think it was 1 week between, right?
It was 1 week. Yeah. We dropped 2.5 pounds in that week. And I mean, there's no magic. It was just more cardio and less food for
Yeah.
it was just turning it up a notch. And it worked and it paid off. And even from one weekend to the next, like there was one judge that was at the same show and they noticed and um, made placing improvements. So yeah, I mean, you just do what you got to do.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes, like, even with the long improvement seasons and making the growth that you needed to make, you can't predict what might come up in your life and change some of that trajectory. So you got to be amenable and willing to pivot and do what needs to be done to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, you're competing for that judge's feedback. Like you show up to hear what you need to improve on next. So,
Yes. And you are stepping away. You did say something earlier that I have not yet circled back to. So I'm going to now. That was you really had to consider if it was worth it to go for the look that they're looking for and to push yourself anymore for that. And you considered, your upper body had grown a lot and you want to be comfortable even walking around. Obviously, the division has changed quite a bit. What are some of the factors that you had to consider when it came to what you are and aren't willing to push for?
um, so some of the factors I think that just any competitor needs to consider is like, okay, can I do this with either my current enhancements that I'm doing, or if you're still natural, can I do this naturally? If not, what other enhancements will it take if I've already kind of maxed out where I'm at now? And then also, what do I want to look like in the off season? Because I think I've talked to a lot of wellness competitors that struggle with that because that's a thick lower body during off season and it's a beautiful, I think it is such a pretty shape, but some women might not want to be that like Coke bottle shaped walking around all the time. And for me, I think part of it is the fact that I am tall, but having my upper body size, like I I already only buy men's shirts. Like my button-down shirts are men's shirts, my sweaters are men's sweaters. Like I have to buy from the men's section because otherwise the seams are like here on my shoulders. Like and so that's like my hack. Like if you have a large upper body or if you are like a figure competitor or whatever, like just shop in the men's section because it fits so much better. Like it'll actually fit your back, it'll actually fit your arms. Like it's so much comfortable and no one can tell a difference. Um, but yeah, I'm really proud of the balance I have now. I'm proud of the shape I have now. I would love to just maintain the muscle size I have now. And I don't feel like I have to chase the criteria anymore.
Nice. I like that. How do you think this is going to impact your relationship and your marriage?
Oh, I'm really excited about like date nights and getting to just, I don't know, we both really enjoy food. Like I wouldn't say we're foodies because to me, like a foodie is someone that goes to like Michelin star restaurants and knows all the different things. And I don't necessarily keep up with any of that, but it's something we like to share. And I know it's hard for him when I'm in prep and we have to eat different foods, or he feels bad if he like goes and gets something that he knows we both enjoy. So I think it'll just open up a lot of opportunities for us to do stuff together. And even with friends, like I went to a book club last night and there was charcuterie, and then we went to sushi afterwards, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is so fun." Like
Yeah, that's awesome.
it's I guess it's a little unfortunate that so much of our social lives or relationship building or whatever is based around food. Um, but it is. And so I think there's a lot of like relationship building that I'm looking forward to now, being able to actually participate in some of that.
Totally. Yeah, that's going to be amazing. And I'm excited to see that journey unfold. And before I ask you for your best advice, is there anything I
Yeah.
didn't ask you that you wish I would have?
Oh, not at all. And I feel like we went all over the place. So I,
But in like a really awesome way. I feel like we covered everything and more than I planned.
okay, good.
Yeah, it's been amazing. So give us your best advice for someone who's never competed before but would like to, and then your best advice for someone on their road to pro.
Um, my best advice for someone, okay, I can't change your rules. Okay, I would say my best advice, I'm
I'd
like,
be
no,
curious what that
let
rule
me
change
save it to last. I'll do this myself. No,
is.
um, had type A problems. Okay, so for someone looking to compete for the first time, I think I would go back to what I was saying earlier of like really figure out your why and decide why you're doing this. And do you want to do it to be able to say that you did it, which is great. I know a lot of people that just compete once because they want to prove to themselves that they can, which I think is great. Or do you want to really go for it? And making that decision up front, I think would have really helped me out in how serious I wish I should have taken it at the beginning. Um, and then for someone on the road to pro, my advice is always to just keep showing up. Like my season where I won my pro card, I did Pittsburgh Pro and got sixth place. That was supposed to be the show that I qualified at for nationally, and I didn't even place. So I got sixth. And then I got third place at NorCal, went on to junior nats and got eighth, and then went to Universe and ended up getting first place at like one of the biggest NPC shows in history. So the reason was every time we asked the judges what their feedback was and we went straight to work. We delivered on that feedback, showed up the next time, got feedback, delivered on it, showed up again. And by the time Universe came around, we had changed everything. We changed my hair, my makeup, my suit, my physique. I looked like a different person than I did at the beginning of the season, but that was because we kept listening to the judges. So if you're on your road to pro, don't think about your placing, think about what your feedback is and how you're going to improve for the next time.
Love that. That's really important. I think it's like focusing on the progress over the product as far as what you might
Absolutely.
be rewarded for. I love that. So, how can people connect with you, follow your journey from here, and even work with you?
Okay, so my Instagram that is now I Okay, so also I lost my Instagram.
Yeah.
Uh, they disabled my account earlier this year. I appealed it and then they just deleted it permanently because they said I was impersonating a celebrity. So I guess flattering. Thanks,
Yeah.
Instagram. I don't know who, I guess. I don't know. So that was a bummer. But I have a new Instagram. It's Megan_IFBB Pro. My just personal life is at Megan Long Life. My business is secondfirst.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I think that's it.
Awesome. Well, that's all going to be in the show notes page. So you guys, that's always on celestial.fit/podcast. Of course, if you're listening right away, it'll be at the top of the page. If you're listening in the future, scroll down to the category section where everything's alphabetized and you'll be able to find not just how to connect with Megan, but also every single topic we covered is in a bulleted list. We have timestamps. So if you're watching this on YouTube, those are generally clickable. So if you want to go back and click and listen to a favorite part, and of course, a full summary of the episode too, kind of like reading the back of a book. You get to see what you're getting yourself into or what you're encouraging others to get into. So always appreciate you guys tuning in, and tag us as you listen. Let Megan know what she said that stood out to you or that you loved this episode. It goes a long way for me and the athletes. And of course, for the podcast itself, we appreciate you leaving reviews and ratings. So all that being said, Megan, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh my gosh, this was so much fun. You're amazing. I'm so glad we were finally able to do this. Thank you.
You're welcome. Me too. And back at you. Stay on with me. I'm going to sign everybody off. You guys, I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day, night, or morning, wherever you are in the world while you're listening to this episode. Just make it awesome.